Ian Doveston, thank you for that. Well, let's return to the Olympics then. And how much do we all care about it? Well, new research ahead of the Games suggests 70% of Brits are feeling positive about London 2012. Joining us here now at Tower Bridge is Claire Emes, the head of trends and insight at Ipsos Mori. The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams is here as well, as is Nicholas Lezard, who writes the Down and Out in London column for the New Statesman. Very good afternoon. Nice to see you all. Perhaps, Claire, you tell us first, what is the trend? How is the nation feeling?
Well, I think there's been a lot of sort of doom and gloom in the news recently. We know that people are, whilst they're positive about their families and perhaps the town they live in, they're not feeling that positive about Great Britain as a whole. So perhaps now's the time for a bit of an injection of positivity, and I think the Olympics could just do that. As you say, the latest Ipsos Mori research shows that 7 in 10 British adults think that the Olympics is going to bring a boost to the nation's mood. We also know that 6 in 10 think that it's going to improve Britain's standing in the world, and a similar proportion think that it's actually going to sort of increase the sense of Britishness among us all. So building on what we heard in the Jubilee and the Royal Wedding. Why is that? Well, we think that a lot of people are very positive about how we're going to do as a nation. So we came fourth in the medal tables in the Beijing 2008 Olympics, exceeding expectations. But actually the vast majority of the British public, according to Ipsos Mori research conducted for UK Sport, shows that we think we're going to do even better than that this year.
Interesting. Zoe, there's been a noticeable change in the newspapers today, hasn't there? I mean, we've had all the problems with security, the traffic problems as well, and this morning the newspapers were, here we are.
Everybody was suddenly really on board, and somebody said the typical column has read, I was lukewarm about the Olympics, but now I've seen how much the pros like it, I've suddenly realised, which is kind of a cynical way to look at it. Certainly the newspapers were really going for the moaning angle, and then they realised that the nation wasn't with them, I think, and suddenly started kind of butt their ideas up. But, you know, it is quite difficult to resist the excitement, I think, just from a kind of, because unlike, I mean, I agree about the Jubilee and the Royal Wedding, but unlike those, there is actually a story here, or, you know, 1,000 stories, 500 stories. There is actually something to watch rather than a procession, which I think we always get kind of wound up about and then feel a bit deflated about afterwards.
So, Nicholas, positive or a cynic?
Myself, I'm going to see what happens.
Okay.
I'm writing a book about it in real time, as it were, and if my mood changes. At the moment, I've been rather down because I've been thinking of the shambles that's been, the omens have not been good in the run-up to it. The people have had to be evicted to make way for the basketball court, the people who aren't allowed to sell chips unless they're selling it with fish, the protesters who've been given Olympic ASBOs for making peaceful protests about this, but the worst thing is just the whole corporate thing, and I hope that we learn the lesson that the next time there's an Olympics we don't have the kind of corporate mania that has turned this place into a kind of really strange monoculture where you're only allowed to eat one kind of food.
We're not going to have another Olympics for 50 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, not here. They do happen every 4 years.
But that's how partially how these games are funded.
Yeah, about 15% of them. The rest of it we've paid for.
Yeah, so, yeah.
It's you're keeping an open mind, as you say. You're writing this book. I mean, do you think, Zoe, in your experience in your writing, that there are many people left that are cynical? Not necessarily in London. London is a very different feel to it at the moment.
Certainly there are people who are saying it's a bit patronising, you know, to have GDP figures in one bulletin and then a kind of ridiculously positive story in the next, as if we can be fed it like a dummy. And there's an element of that, sure. There are always going to be naysayers, but I mean, I suppose what's surprising, and what maybe you would have found surprising, is that actually, even people with no interest in sport are interested in the Olympics. It seems to have brought something out which is completely separate from any one of its parts.
Yeah. Claire, are people on board in your research with the legacy aspect of this?
Yes, certainly. In research we've done among Londoners, we found that 3/4 actually can identify with some legacy of the London Olympic Games. And last year, when we spoke to Londoners, 9 in 10 were already saying that they felt that they'd experienced some increased tourism. So people are talking about regeneration of East London, they're talking about better sporting facilities. So certainly that's coming through in the research we've done.
Nicholas, there's also the research that says actually for a couple of years after an Olympics, everything goes a bit quiet and it is not a boost to the economy.
Well, I can imagine Greece held it in 2004, and I don't think their legacy is really working terribly, although I do hear they've got a good tube system now. But it is like after every party, you're going to feel a bit flat afterwards.
Do you think that's where all the money went in Greece then?
Actually, I think most of it was siphoned off to Cyprus or somewhere like that, and a few offshore places.
You all live round and about London. Zoe, how has the transport system coped? That was one thing that when we got the games, that people said, goodness gracious, our system can't cope as it is.
It's been a mixed bag, to be honest. The Stratford International on Tuesday looked like an abattoir. I mean, it was like it was streaming with people who didn't know how to get in or out. The Javelin obviously hasn't been working properly. The Jubilee line has had problems at North Greenwich. So it's not great, it's not perfect, but I've been cycling around a lot and the roads are incredibly clear. To get from here to the Olympic Stadium would probably take you 10 minutes in a taxi. So the idea that, you know, we're having this kind of Armageddon hasn't happened yet.
They haven't quite started yet.
No, that's true.
A few more hours to go. Nicholas, Zoe and Claire, thank you very much for talking to us. Hope you enjoy the next few weeks. We'll see what comes out of it for you, Nicholas. Well, stay with us here on Sky News. Plenty more live coverage coming up from locations around the country, none less so than the Olympics.